Hello and welcome back to D6 Tabletop. I'm joined by Carl.
Hello!
And today is a doubles tournament. 1,000 points to me, 1,000 points to my partner Dean, 2,000 points aside. How many tables we got today?
14.
14 tables. That's 56 players. It's going to be a mad one. Let's take a look at my list. I brought Admech with the new Codex. Have a look at the area, what's going on, and get on with the tournament.
My list then, I'm taking new Admech Codex. To start off, I've got 10 Skitarii Rangers, led by a Skitarii Marshal to give them 4 rerolls. They've also got a sticky ability, meaning that any objective they hold at the end of the command phase is then mine until any enemy takes it off me, which makes them very useful for holding the home objective and then running away from it. Next up, we've got 2 Castellan robots with a Datasmith. I don't like the current 40k model, so I've used 30k one. The Datasmith has an enhancement, meaning that on a 4-up, if I'm on an objective that I've declared as mine for the turn, I get a command point. Next up, we have 3 Caliphron breaches. I'm using a destroyer model because I haven't actually built my breaches yet, but all my opponents were fine with me using them as breaches. So I've got 3 breaches with the anti-infantry 2 rifle, and I've also got 3 breaches with the anti-vehicle 4 rifle. These ones are being led by a tech priest. He's got the enhancement giving them +1 to hit, making them much more useful. Breaches have also got an ability, they get to reroll 1s to hit, and if they happen to be within 6 inches of a battle line unit, i.e. my rangers, they get to reroll all the hit roll. These are also infantry models, believe it or not, despite the fact they got tracks, so they can still go through buildings and cut across the board pretty quickly, which is nice. 2 chickens. These are Taser Go chickens. They're anti-Walker 2. They're very fast. They haven't got much else. They're more for objective scoring, really, and if there happens to be a Dreadnought or a little knight in the way, I might try and poke it with the tasers. But other than that, they're mainly there for scoring objectives and just causing speed bumps. Plus, they're really cool models. And then we've got an Onaga Dooncrawler. I think it's a really cool model. I'm not sure it's really optimized yet in the Codex, but I couldn't help but not bring it because I think it looks really cool. It's using the Eradication Beamer, meaning it gets D3 sustained shots, which is really nice, and if the target is closer than half range, it gets a bit of a jump up in AP and damage, which is also very nice. Any battle line unit, that's basically the Skitarii, that are within range of it, or wholly within 6 of it, also get a 4-up invulnerable save. Although I never use that in the entire tournament because they were too busy running off and securing objectives. This is the new Codex, so I'm running the Explorator Mana Pool attachment, meaning that at the start of each command phase, I pick an objective. If I'm on it, or the opponent's units are on it, I get to reroll 1s to wound. So that's my list. Let's have a little look at the venue, and then we'll move on to Game 1. So as I said at the start, this is a joint tournament hosted by Atlas Tabletop Gaming, located in the docks in Gloucester, and the GTGC, or the Gloucester Tabletop Gaming Community, held at the Tuffley Community Centre in Tuffley, Gloucestershire. For those of you in the Gloucester area, there's a gaming club held at the Tuffley Community Centre every Tuesday evening where you can book your tables or come on down with your mates or meet new people, obviously, and play different tabletop games. That's 40k, Age of Sigmar, Blood Bowl, they're all there. Warhammer Fantasy Battle 4th Edition, I think I've seen being played there as well before. Star Wars Legion, all sorts, and board games. It's all going on. So if you're in the area and fancy coming down, give us a shout. So with all of that, let's move on to Game 1. So Game 1, we are playing Chaz and Jamie of Team Turtleneck. They've brought Tyranids and Space Wolves to face off against our Admech and Custodes. The deployment is Dawn of War, primary mission Scorched Earth, and mission rule Chilling Rain. After we finished deploying, it was slightly obvious that we'd set up our castles on opposite sides of the board, which meant that my guns took 2 turns to bring to bear. Primarily, Jamie and Chaz focus on the Custodes rather than the Admech. They are, after all, a much bigger threat in melee, and they were hoping to get rid of them with those Nids and Wolves before I could bring any guns to try and whittle them down. They've got a fair few size big bugs. They've got a Norn. They've got that weird one that's got the really long tongue. And they've got a lot of Wolves. Now, playing Chaz and Jamie is always a fun game. I think I've played Chaz nearly every tournament I've done in Gloucester, and it's always silly, it's always brilliant. They're great guys to play. So as we go into this game, we haven't really got much of a tactic. Custodes run forward, take as much fire as they can, and deal out as much damage as possible. Try and work down some of the bigger bugs and try and take some of that melee pressure away due to the fact that I am a shooting army with a couple of minor melee units, so I'm not going to be able to deal with much of that at all. The wolves have got a drop pod, and when that comes in, a load of las guns jump out and start trying to eradicate things. The drop pod's a really cool model, and the fact that it can drop down in turn 1 rather than having to wait till turn 2 is a really cool tactic that I think I might use myself when I start doing Space Marines. Because of that dropping down, I've brought my breaches through the main rune in the middle, allowing me to shoot at them and remove most of them from the objective. Now, the ability to reroll ones to wound I thought was going to be more potent than it is. I certainly found during this game that the actual ability to do the rerolls, due to being in range of a battle line or the Scutari unit, much more useful than having reroll ones to wound. It's situational, I think, and I'm not entirely sure at this point whether I should have bothered and gone with a different detachment of Admech, maybe the Radzone Corps. Anyway, despite all this, whilst all this is going on, one of the key aspects of the game, obviously, is about board control. Due to the fact that they've got a mostly melee army, that means they have to get within melee range and melee threat to remove units scoring points. My chickens are on the far side of the board scoring points, whilst my other ones are staying far enough away that they can't get charged, but they can still do actions on objectives and keep scoring to keep us in the game. Whilst the Custodes are there, tying them up in combat and holding them back to at least allow us to score if we can't kill things as we go along. By turn 2 or 3, I've managed to get some decent guns to bear, and I'm able to start taking some firepower and taking down some units, removing from the table a big bug and some wolves to make that unit a lot less punchy. So when I do charge in, my Castellans are able to wipe out the squad of wolves alongside the Custodes that are there, allowing them to then consolidate into the Norn and the big unit of wolves that have started there, making it easier to start getting some control over the board and the units. As we go into the later stages of the game, the tide started to turn, the shooting and the Custodes just not dying at all, and also being able to be brought back for a command point, which is very nice, allowing us to get board control and control the flow of the game, along with some good secondary draws, allow us to win the game with the final score 95 to 38. The Admech and the Custodes. Playing Jamie and Chaz is always a great game. It doesn't even matter. It didn't even feel like we were winning half the time. We were just too busy enjoying the game we were playing. So with all of that, it's time to move on to Game 2. Game 2 then, we are playing Methlehem and their combined armies of Tau and Admech. Interesting here because the Admech on the other side of the table are running the Radzone Corps with the extra 6-inch zone added with the enhancement onto a character, which, to be honest, was pretty devastating before the game even begun, doing mortal wounds and battle shock pretty much on every unit across the board. And this would become a theme going out throughout the game. Primary mission, taken hold, mission rule, chosen battlefield, and deployment, sweeping engagement. Now, these are both very powerful shooting armies. It's a kind of army that you don't want to get turn 1 against you. And guess what? They got turn 1 against us. The Admech army is running 2 lots of 6 breaches, all with sustained hits, all with Scutari nearby to give them rerolls. The Tau is 2 Devilfishes full of breaches, Crisis Team unit, and some Tetras to grant him extra guiding rerolls. So with them going first, we had to stand by, take all the firepower, and hope we were still alive to actually have a part of the game. As it happened, I probably lost about a third of my force to all the firepower. The Custodes shrugged off most of it, a few wounds here and there, but it left me with very minimal breaches left. So it was all about board control and play and seeing what we can do with what we got left. As a Tau player, I'm a big fan of breacher bombs, that is the breaches and devilfish. However, playing against them, I'm not a very big fan, so they had to go. So I sent my Sockham robots, or the Castellans, forward to go and punch devilfish into pieces, and they did, whilst sending the chickens around to try and hold some objectives and score some points, and in general try and get some board control without being trapped on a deployment zone, because if we stayed on deployment zone, we were taking more mortal wounds each turn because of the Radzone Corps rule. This was a hard game to go second in, due to the amount of firepower that had coming at us. It did kind of put us on the back foot for the beginning, especially with the fact that we couldn't hide in our own deployment zone, because we'd also be taking extra mortals from the Rad Zone Corporal. Although we managed to negate a fair bit of damage by getting rid of the Devilfish and the Breacher squads, and when the Crisis team landed, they did end up whiffing, and my Onager Dooncrawler survived on 1 wound, allowing them to be taken out in turn by the Custodes in our turn. However, because of the Rad Zone Corporal, my Dooncrawler was then killed by 1 single mortal wound, and so was my last Breacher, meaning that I lost 2 units before I even started my movement phase. Further solidifying that maybe I should have taken that version and not the reroll 1s to wound on an objective. Best moments being my Chicken Walkers running forward and stabbing his Chicken Walkers. He'd brought the lasgun version, I'd brought the taser version, so mine were better at combat, so I managed to run in and take out his chickens with mine, before they subsequently got shot and killed by everything else still on the table. So after hanging on, scoring some secondaries, and doing what we could, the game ended with the final score, 43 to us, 100 to Methlehem. And now we move on to Game 3. Game 3 then, we're playing Raf and Kieran, and we're playing the deployment Search and Destroy, primary mission Priority Targets, and mission rule Hidden Supplies. This is an interesting one. The rule Hidden Supplies requires you to remove the middle objective marker and split it into 2 extra ones going in diagonal directions away from the center of the board, so effectively giving you 6 objectives to fight over. So as we look at the units on the board, the main problem we've got is this whacking great knight. Now, we've got 1 decent Custodes tank, but other than that, there's not many other heavy guns in the list. I've got some anti-vehicle 4 on the breaches, but they're not going to do much against that paintwork. Might scratch it. Other than that, the whole point of the game here is to play the objectives, score the points, and try and weather the storm from that as much as possible. The little knights aren't so bad of a problem. My Chicken Walkers are anti-walker too, so they could do some damage, but with the amount of wounds the knight has, they're probably not going to touch that, but they will hopefully do some damage to the little ones. And hopefully with some sustained shooting and enough guns to bear, I should be able to deal with the little ones whilst letting Dean deal with the sisters on the other side of the terrain piece. Due to the size of this piece of terrain in the middle, most of the battle was fought on either side of it, which did mean that bringing guns to bear meant that I had to keep using the assault imperative. If you haven't played Admech before, at the start of each command phase, you either choose to have all of the guns in your list as heavy or all of the guns in your list as assault. Pretty much you always take the assault option because standing still does not produce good gameplay unless you're already on the objectives. So being able to advance and shoot every round is very good and does help if you need to react fast to other plays in the game to get your units across the board. Especially when breaches only move 5, it does help get them a bit faster across. However, the terrain did help in the sense that it meant that Dean's close combat Custode units could get into position without being shot at a great deal by other units, allowing him to go to the top end of the board and work his way round, charging and receiving charges from the sisters units, including whatever the name is of that woman in the big iron suit. I'm not a sisters collector, I don't know what their names are. Now, the one downside with running knights I find is that because you've only got 4 models, you don't have a lot of presence on the table, and you usually rely on your partner to help score the points whilst you deal out damage. Now, because of the amount of terrain here and the amount of line of sight blocking terrain, he wasn't able to deal as much damage as needed to stop us from putting pressure on both sides of the table. As such, we were able to start lifting and getting rid of the little knights, leaving just the 1 big knight to deal with. Now, when you've only got 1 big model, it's not so much of a problem to ignore it, or at least just tie it up for a little bit. You haven't got to worry so much. It's when they've got so many different threats that you get to worry a little bit. But once it was down to just the big knight, and a few of the sisters left to deal with, we were able to secure the board control, score those points, and get us a decent score on the game. Bringing the final score to 100 to the Admech and Custodes, 32 to the sisters and the Imperial Knights. Good game to play. Both Kieran and Raf are good players to play against and always a fun game. A lot of plays trying to get around and outmaneuver each other with the terrain, try and get shots off and get charges in. So with that, we're looking at final rankings and wrap up of the day. So at the end of the day, we came 8th out of 28. So not bad at all, I don't think, considering the new Codex. I've played maybe 3 or 4 games with them so far. What I'm finding so far is I'm not really enjoying the Explorator and Mana Pool detachment. I might start using the Radiation Corpse version instead. I think that's probably got more use in the game. I find the Explorator one so situational that I didn't find it benefited me much in the day. I think having something that happens every round will be more effective at putting pressure on your opponents in their objective. that I think that might be a better option to go with going forward, so I'm going to try that next. In terms of the Codex, it's alright. It still requires quite a bit of thinking to get your auras to overlap and try and get your shots to go off, and it is quite a lot of thinking to get it to go. It's certainly not one that you could just pick up and play after a few beers. You certainly need to be able to remember what you're doing and remember what characters cause what to do. It's quite a fun Codex, but I think that with stuff that's already been released, such as the Tyranids and the Space Marine ones, that have got so many detachments that just work without having to put too much effort in to make sure you build certain lists or put in certain enhancements or put in certain units, that maybe it's a bit too much, I think, potentially to have so many requirements just to get things to pop off. I don't know. It certainly feels with my Space Marines and my Tyranids and even my Necrons that I don't have to work so hard to get a combo to work. You have to commit quite a lot of units with Admech to be able to get something that you would consider reliable, especially when it comes to shooting, which is a bit of a shame considering they're a shooting army. But to get rerolls to hit, for instance, with the breaches, you need to make sure that you're within 6 with the battle line units, or if you want to give them a invulnerable, you've got to make sure they're within 6 of the Dooncrawler. But that means they can't run that far away to start scoring new points. They've got to stay back and effectively just sit there and give their... It feels like it's a bit much that you've got to commit so much just to get one unit to work reliably, compared to when you look at other codexes when they get things like put a character in and then you get +1 to hit all the time. And you can use 3 of those characters, it just happens. Whereas in the Admech Codex, you have to give a character an enhancement to even get that ability. I'm going to try a few more with them and see how I get on. I've got other armies as well, so it's been interesting. So we'll keep playing it through and seeing how we go. If you've got any experience with Admech so far, pop the comment below. Let me know how you're finding them. That about wraps us up for this video. So if you've enjoyed watching this and you enjoy this kind of content, please like the video, drop a comment below, and consider subscribing to the channel. We've got battle reps, tournament reps, we've got hobby videos and all sorts. So have a little look, and as always, any support is greatly appreciated. So until the next time, thank you for watching, take care, we'll see you again. Goodbye.